Hey, night owls, tonight we're digging into something dark, dirty, and downright illegal, literally. We're talking about why you wouldn't last a single night as an 1800s grave robber. I know what you're thinking. Grave robbing? That sounds like something out of a horror story, maybe a little cloak and dagger mystery, a spade under the moonlight, and a quick escape with a bag of gold teeth. But no, you've been lied to. This wasn't some high-stakes heist for riches. This was night after night of digging through rotten soil, hauling half-decomposed bodies out of the ground and dragging them, sometimes naked, sometimes in pieces, through the mud. You work in silence, you smell like old corpses and regret you carry a shovel, a sack, and the kind of paranoia that comes from knowing the townsfolk will literally beat you to death if they catch you. Before we crawl any deeper, make sure to hit that like button if you're into weird, real history, and go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the stuff you definitely didn't learn in school. And hey, drop a comment below. Would you rather be the digger or the dissection table? Now, dim the lights, stay low, and keep your boots quiet. You've got graves to rob. And time, it's not on your side. Chapter 1. Nightfall and Nerves. The sun is down, the last flickers of orange have died behind the rooftops, and the street lamps, if your city even has them, are casting more shadow than light. People are heading home, locking doors, drawing curtains. You, however, are just getting started. You're an 1800s grave robber, or if you want to be fancy about it, a resurrectionist. But don't let the name fool you. There's no miracle here. No ghostly resurrection. Just you, a shovel, a lantern, a half-rotted satchel, and the kind of desperation that turns a man into a nocturnal ghoul. You don't do this for fun. No one does. You do it because you're broke, maybe hungry, and because there's a medical student in town who pays by the body, no questions asked. And that's the entire arrangement. You dig, you haul, they cut, you get paid. Tonight's target is fresh. Buried 2 days ago in the churchyard at the edge of town. Young man, fell off a roof or drowned in a barrel or maybe choked on a tooth. Doesn't matter, the body's still whole, and that's what counts. The fresher, the better. The surgeons want tissue that bleeds, organs that still resemble organs, skin that hasn't yet collapsed under the weight of its own rot. You leave the boarding house quietly, wrapped in your thickest coat. You carry no identification, no letters, nothing that can tie you to a name. You don't speak to anyone, just nod once at the barkeep who looks the other way like he always does. He knows, everyone knows. But as long as you keep quiet and spend your coin discreetly, they pretend not to care. Your boots click down the cobblestones. The city's quieter at night, but not silent. Dogs bark in alleyways. A drunk stumbles past you singing a hymn. Somewhere a baby cries. But all of that fades as you head east, toward the churchyard and away from what passes for civilization. Your partner is already waiting. Tommy. He's older than you, thinner, and hasn't had all his teeth for at least 10 years. He smells like gin and mildew. You've never seen him without a hat. He nods when he sees you. No words, just action. You wait until the church bell tolls midnight, not because it's magical, but because it's practical. That's when the last of the tavern traffic disappears. That's when the watchmen are half asleep. That's when your nerves have finally given up trying to convince you to run home and change your profession. You climb the low fence and duck between headstones. Some are crooked, some are new, most are forgotten. There's mud under your boots, even though it hasn't rained in days. Churchyards always seem to be damp. The earth here isn't solid, it's heavy, tired. You find the grave easily, 2 days fresh. Flowers still on top. Someone cried here recently? Maybe a mother, maybe a lover? You try not to think about that. Tommy hands you the spade. The first few shovels are easy. The topsoil is loose, still unsettled. But the deeper you go, the worse it gets. It's heavier, wetter, your arms ache. Your breath fogs in the lantern light. You have to work quietly, scooping without scraping. No clinking metal, no grunts, no noise. Every time your shovel hits something dense, your heart stops. Stone, root, ribcage, but it's never the body yet. You're 5 feet down now. Maybe more. You've lost track. Your hands blister. Your coat sticks to your back. Your knees are wet. You curse softly, wiping your brow with a sleeve that's dirtier than your thoughts. Then you hit it. Not wood, but the soft thud of rotting pine. The coffin. You stop. Breathe. Tommy nods. He lowers a burlap sack and the body hook. Now comes the delicate part. You clear the top of the coffin, brush away soil, feel the grain of the lid beneath your fingertips. You find the nails. You wedge the claw end of the spade under the lip. You pry. It creaks. Loud. Too loud. You both freeze. Wait. Nothing. You keep going. The lid comes off with a slow, damp sigh. And there he is, the man they buried. His face is pale. lips bluish, mouth slightly open like he died mid-sentence, eyes mercifully closed. You've seen worse, much worse, but that doesn't make it easier. He's wearing a suit. Something cheap but neat, probably the only one he owned. His hands are crossed. There's a wilted flower tucked between them. You remove it gently. You always do. Then comes the rope and hook under the arms, around the chest, carefully. You don't want damage. Too many broken ribs and the surgeon knocks down your price. It takes 10 minutes to lift him out. He's heavier than you expect. Dead weight is a cliché for a reason. Gravity has him now. And she never lets go easily. You lay him on the burlap. Wrap him tight. He won't fit in the sack entirely, but enough to carry. Enough to pass as something else if anyone spots you. Then you refill the grave. Not fully, just enough to make it look untouched in the dark. Enough that the caretakers won't notice until it's too late. Maybe they'll think it was foxes. Maybe they'll just pretend not to care. You climb out of the pit, your knees screaming, your fingers numb. You each grab a side of the sack and lift. Then you walk. Back through the graveyard, back over the fence, back through the city streets, now damp with fog. You say nothing. You don't look down. You don't look anyone in the eye. You reach the back alley of the medical college just before 2 a.m. A door creaks open. A figure nods. Money changes hands. The sack disappears. No names, no words. You walk away with 8 shillings, 4 each, for 2 hours of grave work, a lifetime of guilt and the stench of mortality clinging to your skin. You don't sleep well. You never do. And tomorrow night, there's another grave and another body, because the dead never rest, and neither do you. Chapter 2. The Cost of Fresh Corpses. It's easy to imagine that people would look down on grave robbers. And they did, publicly, loudly. They called you monsters, desecrators, vultures. But behind closed doors, they were your customers. In the early 1800s, anatomy schools and medical colleges were booming, particularly in places like London, Edinburgh, Philadelphia, and Boston. The science of surgery was finally stepping beyond leeches and bleeding. Doctors needed bodies, not old books, not wax models, real human remains to slice open, map out, and learn from. Dissections were how medical students learned to fix a broken limb or find a lodged bullet. But here's the problem. Bodies were illegal. In most places, the only cadavers legally available for study came from executed criminals, and there weren't enough hangings to supply the demand. A surgeon might get 1 cadaver a year, if he was lucky, and that body had likely been dead for days, bloated, stiff, and mostly unusable. That's where you came in. You weren't a hero. You weren't even respected, but you were needed, desperately. A fresh subject could fetch anywhere from £4 to £10, depending on the city, the season, and the condition of the merchandise. In some cases, you could earn a week's wages in one night, enough for rent, food, and just maybe enough gin to forget what you did. You weren't paid in public. The transactions were always discreet. Medical professors handed off money through back doors or sent intermediaries with coin purses stitched into their jackets. The bodies were taken in through cellars or through side gates marked deliveries. Officially, no one knew anything. Unofficially, everyone knew everything. You and your partner had your regular customers, the university on the hill, the anatomy professor with the permanent ink stains, the surgeon's apprentice who always kept one eye on the alley and one hand on the latch. They needed you and you needed them. You learned quickly which bodies sold best. Young, healthy males were top dollar. Female corpses, slightly less valuable unless the class needed to learn about childbirth or reproductive organs. Children were in high demand too, which is something you tried not to think too hard about. Disease-ridden corpses, not ideal. You couldn't exactly charge full price for a cadaver already half-eaten by infection. Condition mattered. You learned how to extract a body without snapping bones, how to use a body hook gently, how to fold limbs into a sack without making it obvious what was inside. You weren't a mortician, but you developed skills, horrible specific skills that no one ever wanted to hear about. And then there was the timing. Fresh was best, but not too fresh. If someone had just died yesterday, you had to wait until the burial. That usually gave you a 2-day window. Any longer and decomposition made the body useless, or at least worth less. In summer, the clock ticked faster. In winter, cold bought you time. But you couldn't just show up every time a bell tolled. You watched obituaries, checked funeral listings, memorized names on headstones. You walked churchyards at dawn, noting which graves were new, which had flowers, which were guarded. Because sometimes people guarded them. The more grave robbing became known, the more families took precautions. Iron cages, called mort safes, were bolted over graves. Some families hired armed watchers. In Scotland, some even placed spring-loaded traps around tombs. You knew the risks, you knew the laws too. In most cities, grave robbing wasn't classified as theft, not exactly. After all, the dead weren't considered property, but you could be fined, beaten, or imprisoned for disturbing a grave. And if a family caught you, well, the law wouldn't be fast enough to save your teeth, so you worked fast, quiet, always looking over your shoulder, and the money, while good, came with curses. You couldn't spend it freely. Flash too much silver at a tavern and someone might ask questions. You couldn't buy nice clothes or move into a better flat, not without raising eyebrows, so you lived lean, dressed poor, and stashed your coin in floorboards and chimney cracks. Even your reputation among criminals was strange. Thieves called you dirty, pickpockets wouldn't share tables with you, even con men whispered behind your back. You were tolerated, not welcomed, but none of that mattered on payday. When the door creaked open and a student with ink-stained fingers peered out, you felt a strange mix of pride and nausea. You were keeping the medical world turning. You were advancing science, helping young doctors become surgeons, all while smelling like mouldy flesh and ash. You tried not to think about it when you handed over a bag. Tried not to look when the student untied the cord and peeled back the burlap. Sometimes they asked you questions. Was this one drowned? How old do you think she was? Was it hard to get him out? You didn't answer. You never answered. The fewer words spoken, the better. Still, you developed a sixth sense. You could smell a fake grave. You could tell if a coffin had been booby-trapped. You could dig a 6-foot hole in under 20 minutes and fill it back faster than a gravedigger twice your size. You got good at this, and that scared you, because no one should be good at this. It got under your skin, the routine, the rot, the quiet nights where the only sound was your own breath and the wet squelch of your shovel. You stopped sleeping deeply. Every dog bark made you flinch. You washed your hands with vinegar, but the smell never quite left. Some nights you wondered what would happen if someone dug your grave. Would you be worth £4? Would someone carry your body in a sack? Would a student pull back the cloth and say, "This one looks like he lived hard"? You didn't know, but you kept digging, because rent didn't pay itself, and your soul was already halfway buried. Chapter 3. Dirt, bones, and disguises. You'd think the worst part of grave robbing is the actual corpse. The smell, the sight. The moment you reach into a coffin and feel something soft that shouldn't be soft, but it's not. That's just part of the job. No, the real nightmare is everything else. Tonight, you're going alone. Tommy's disappeared. Either drunk, dead, or smart enough to find a better profession. You're not sure. But the professor needs a body by morning, and you need the money, so you're going solo. One shovel, one sack, one poor excuse for a disguise. You start with the usual prep: long coat, scarf around the face, low-brimmed hat. In another life, this might have made you look mysterious. In this one, you look like a criminal, and not even a good one. You tuck your tools into a satchel, check for coin, and slip out the back door into the dark. It's a long walk to the edge of town. The graveyard lies past the last row of houses, tucked behind a church that's either abandoned or just very forgiving. You know the layout, you've mapped it in your head. 3 rows of old graves, one newer section near the back, and a tool shed that might as well have a sign reading, "Help yourself, robbers welcome." You pick tonight's mark carefully. A middle-aged man, buried 5 days ago. Still fresh enough to be valuable, but not so recent that there's a family lurking nearby. His stone's modest, no flowers, no cage, just a name, 2 dates, and a slab of granite that barely resists the wind. You kneel beside the mound, lantern low, gloves on. You take your first scoop of dirt. Here's what they don't tell you about grave dirt. It's heavy, not just weight-wise, but emotionally. It's wet, clumpy, sticky in a way that clings to your boots and your conscience, and it takes hours to move 6 feet of it. Your hands blister after 20 minutes. Your arms go numb in under an hour. You're sweating under 3 layers, and it's 40 degrees out. Every sound makes you pause. A dog bark, a horse in the distance, the wind snapping against nearby branches like a warning. You keep digging. Eventually you hit it. Wood. Soft, damp, starting to rot around the edges. You pause, take a breath, stretch your back and try not to think about the smell you're about to unleash. You pry the lid. It groans. Of course it does. You brace yourself and lift. Inside is the man, or what's left of him. The skin has gone pale grey, lips pulled tight, fingers curled in like he's still clinging to the memory of being alive. His suit's damp, the lapels stuck to his collarbone. There's a button missing on his vest. His shoes are still polished. That's rare. You stare for a second too long, then you move. You loop the hook under his arms, haul him up, try not to gag as the body sags in ways no living thing should. The sack takes him, barely. You cinch it shut. You sit back. You're halfway done. Now for the part that keeps most people out of this business, getting away with it. You can't walk through town dragging a human-shaped bag behind you. You can't take the main roads. You can't let the wrong person see your face. This is where the disguise comes in. This is where the lies begin. You sling the bag over your shoulder. It's heavier than you remember. Your back tenses, your knees buckle, but you don't stop. You cut through the woods, cross the river at the shallow bend. Your boots fill with mud. The sack scrapes against branches. You stop once to catch your breath and swear the body moved. You make it to the alley behind the college just before dawn. The back door opens. A different student this time. Skinny, young, shaking. He doesn't ask your name, just takes the bag, hands over a coin pouch, and vanishes. You count it later. It's short, but you don't argue. Because arguing over stolen corpses isn't a career move, it's a gravestone. You stagger home, wash your hands, try to sleep, but you can't. Because every time you close your eyes, you see the man's face. And every time you dig again, you wonder who's next. And when, and if it might ever be you. Chapter 4. Traps, Guards and Graves that bite back. You'd think grave robbing would be a one-way street. You dig, you steal, you leave. Maybe you wash your hands if you have access to soap. End of story. But that's the thing about digging up the dead. The living don't like it. And in the 1800s, the living were getting clever. Tonight's job is supposed to be simple. A small country parish with a fresh grave, a lazy groundskeeper, and 0 watchmen. That's what you were told. That's what you believed. And that's why tonight is going to go horribly wrong. You arrive around midnight. The air is thick, the fog heavy enough to taste. You've brought your usual kit: shovel, lantern, rope, and a bag that's definitely not big enough for what you're about to drag through the hedgerows. You climb the stone wall, drop to the other side, and take a slow, cautious step onto churchyard soil. And that's when your foot clicks. Not loudly, just enough. Then comes the snap, then the whip. The branch above you bends. A loop of wire springs tight around your ankle, and suddenly you're airborne, upside down, swinging 6 feet off the ground like a drunk pheasant in a Victorian snare. You drop your lantern. It crashes, goes out. You curse. Loud. The rope creaks, holding you like a piñata filled with shame. You swing in silence for a few seconds, trying to process the new reality. You've been caught, not by police, not by angry mobs, by a trap meant for raccoons. You hang there for at least 3 minutes before your knife cuts the rope. You drop hard, twisting your ankle and smashing your elbow into the headstone of some poor soul who definitely didn't see this coming. You lie there in the dirt, mud on your face, humiliation soaking through your coat. Then you start laughing, because what else is there to do? Eventually, you limp toward your target grave. It's newer, 6 days old, but undisturbed. You clear the grass and dig. Slow, cautious. You check every few inches now. Every crunch of earth might hide a wire, a spring, or worse. See, traps aren't just for show anymore. People have started fighting back. After enough families found their loved ones missing, and enough doctors mysteriously had more material than the local gallows could provide, the public caught on. And the public got angry. That's when the mort safes showed up. If you haven't seen one, imagine a metal cage bolted over a coffin. Not above it, around it, like a prison cell for the dead. Iron rods, interlocking plates, padlocks with keys held only by the church. Some were temporary, removed after a few weeks once the body was too decayed to be of value. Others stayed forever. Then came the watchmen. Some families paid locals to sit near graves overnight, armed with dogs, rifles, and more moral outrage than they knew what to do with. Sometimes it was just an old man with a lantern and a bottle of gin. Sometimes it was a young man with a bad temper and a shotgun. Either way, you didn't want to meet them. You heard stories. One man got shot in the thigh, bled out behind a mausoleum, and was dumped in the same grave he'd tried to rob. Another was caught tied to a tree and had "body thief" carved into his chest with a dull knife. Sometimes they didn't even kill you. They just beat you until you begged them to. And worst of all, sometimes it was the caretakers who set you up. You'd dig a grave halfway only to find it empty. A decoy, a trap to lure in the desperate. And when you climbed out, panting, sweating, covered in guilt, they'd be waiting. 5 men, 2 lanterns, 1 priest who refused to speak above a whisper. You never ran so fast in your life. Back to tonight. You finish digging, no mort safes, no traps, but now you're paranoid. Every twig is a threat, every breeze a warning. You pry the coffin lid slowly. The smell hits first. Sour, wet, undeniable. You wince, then you look. The body's intact, sort of. The skin is mottled, jaw clenched, one hand half curled like it never quite let go of whatever it was holding. You reach in, and something moves. You freeze. You look closer. A rat, fat, glistening, with something red around its mouth. It stares at you, blinks once, and dives deeper into the folds of the dead man's coat. You gag, loud, but you don't stop. You pull the body out, wrap it, haul it to the surface. You get the sack around most of it. The head won't fit. You tie it anyway. Awkward, heavy. You lift, and from somewhere nearby a voice. Stop. You turn. A man, older, rifle in hand, lantern glowing like a halo of judgment. You don't think. You run. You don't care that the sack bounces, that the body drags through brambles, that your ankle is screaming. You just run. Shots fire behind you, wild, loud. One hits a tree, one hits nothing. You keep running, over the fence, through the woods, across a creek you don't remember crossing. On the way in, you drop the body twice, curse both times, but you make it. Back to the road, back to the hidden cart, back to the driver who barely looks up as you throw the bundle in and collapse beside it. He cracks the reins, the horse moves, you breathe, barely. Later you'll clean your boots, burn your clothes, pretend this never happened. But tonight you'll dream of cages, of rats, of voices in the dark. Because robbing graves is easy, until the graves start fighting back. Chapter 5. Blood, Mud and a Bag of Teeth. Some nights you dig up a body, deliver it whole, and collect your dirty coins like a gentleman ghoul. Other nights the job gets messier, dirtier, more desperate. Sometimes the body isn't the paycheck, it's what's on the body that makes it worth robbing in the first place, like teeth or skin or bones. Let's talk about that. It starts the night you get a message slipped under your door. No name, just a location. An alleyway near the fish market. You show up late, as instructed, your coat collar high and your nerves higher. The man you meet is no medical student, no professor either. He's something else, something lean, rat-like, dressed too well for a man standing in puddles. He doesn't ask if you're a grave robber. He already knows. He just says, teeth, top and bottom, intact, fresh. Then he hands you a sack. That's the deal. No full cadavers, no dragging limbs through churchyards, just the jaws. You want to ask why? You don't. You've heard rumours that wealthy aristocrats in need of dentures pay handsomely for human ivory, that nothing fits quite like real teeth from a real skull, that surgeons keep jars of molars in back rooms, sorted by size like buttons, that a clean set of teeth, especially from someone young, can fetch more than half a month's wage. So you take the job. You know a body that fits the bill. Young, died sudden, buried shallow in the pauper's lot outside the city. No mourners, no mort safe, no one who'll miss a few teeth. You dig alone. It's wet, always is. The soil sticks to your boots and knees. You hit wood faster than usual. The coffin is barely nailed shut. You pop the lid with your hands. The face is still intact. A boy, maybe 20, maybe younger. His eyes are closed. His lips are pale. You feel sick. You pull the sack from your coat. The tools, too, a short chisel, a small mallet, a pair of wire cutters. Not surgical instruments, but effective. You kneel beside the corpse. Gently press your thumb to the boy's jaw. Stiff. You wedge your fingers between his lips. Part them just enough. Teeth white, clean. A few molars, dark at the base, but still usable. You lift the chisel and stop. You tell yourself he's already dead, that he doesn't feel it, that his mouth isn't a mouth anymore. It's just a source, just a job. You strike. The crack echoes in your skull. You twist, pull. The tooth comes loose. The next one is easier. You work fast. Your hands are shaking. Eventually the sack is full. 32 teeth, give or take. A few broken, some whole. You wrap them in cloth, seal the sack, recover the grave, and stumble home with dirt under your nails and something colder under your skin. The next morning you return to the alley. The man is waiting. You hand over the sack. He doesn't open it, just feels the weight. He hands you a pouch, more than you expected. You count it later. Enough for rent, enough for bread, enough for 2 nights of not thinking about what you've become. You don't tell anyone. Not your contact at the medical school, not the other resurrectionist, not even Tommy, who you haven't seen in weeks and who might be in a ditch somewhere. You do another job the next week. This one's worse. The body's face is swollen, half decayed. You use pliers this time. The teeth crack off with roots still bleeding dark brown. You vomit afterward, but the money's good. The job gets easier. That's the terrifying part. You start to notice things. Which corpses are worth opening for more than just bones? Which shoes are still polished? Which pockets have coins sewn into the lining? Which rings come off cleanly with a twist of the wrist and a little help from a knife. You tell yourself it's not stealing. They're dead. They don't need it. But when you catch your reflection in a shop window, covered in mud, red smears across your cuffs, you don't recognize the man looking back. One night, a job goes wrong. You find a grave freshly dug, too fresh. You're halfway in when the ground beneath you shifts. The coffin cracks open before you touch it. Inside, nothing. Not empty, just nothing. No body, no clothes, no bones, just air. Then you hear the voice behind you, looking for something. You turn, the caretaker holding a lantern and a shotgun. You don't speak, you don't run. He stares at you. "Go," he says, "next time I bury you in there." You believe him. You climb out, quietly, slowly, leave your tools behind. You don't sleep that night. The next job you take is cleaner, full body, medical student, no extras. But you still check the teeth out of habit because now you know how much they're worth and how little you are. Chapter 6. The smell that never leaves it starts behind your ears. A creeping, sour cling that no soap ever fully removes. It lives in your sleeves, beneath your fingernails, in the crease of your nostrils. A smell that isn't quite death, but something worse. Something that's tried to escape death and failed. The smell follows you home every night. After the digging, after the lifting, after the haggling and the coin pouch handshake, it doesn't matter how fresh the body was or how quick the job went. Once you've opened a grave, it opens you. At first you think you can beat it. You boil water, scrub with vinegar and lie. You burn your clothes behind the shed and swear it's just in your imagination. But it lingers. Your bedsheets catch it, your pillow carries it. You wake in the middle of the night, convinced someone's rotting in the hallway. It changes how people treat you. The butcher stops making small talk. The landlady hesitates before handing you your key. Children stare, dogs bark. You buy stronger cologne and it only makes things worse, like dumping perfume on a dead flower. No matter how you cover it, it seeps through. Your hands become the worst part. They look fine, mostly. Cracked knuckles, missing nail half-moons, occasional blisters, but they feel wrong. Always slightly damp, always cold. You wash them 3-4 times a day, and still you swear you can feel soft skin that's not yours pressed against your palms. Sometimes after a long night you sit alone by the hearth and sniff the cuffs of your coat. Not because you enjoy it, but because you're trying to understand how far gone you really are. You hold a damp glove to your nose and wonder how many people you've carried inside it. You lose count. You stop trying. One night, a girl leans in at the tavern. Her dress is clean, her voice warm, her curiosity sharp. She asks you your name. You lie. She asks you what you do. You pause. You don't answer. She smiles, tilts her head, and tells you she smells something strange, sweet and sour, like pickled onions gone off. She laughs. You don't. You leave, because no matter how many aliases you invent, the stench always gives you away. It even affects your sleep. You start dreaming in rot, wet footsteps, clods of earth thudding on pine, shovels scraping ribs. You dream of a man sitting upright in a coffin and handing you back the tooth you took. You wake up gasping, the smell's still there. You stop going out during the day. The sun makes the odor worse somehow, brings it to the surface. You sleep during daylight, work at night, sweat through your shirt in your dreams and carry a flask to kill the taste it leaves in your throat. You start smoking a pipe just to give your mouth something else to focus on. The smoke masks it a little, but then you start associating that scent with the job too. You light the pipe one night and immediately vomit in the alley behind your lodging. It's not just the smell anymore. It's what it means. That you've spent too long in the soil. That you've forgotten how to smell anything else. You try once, just once, to take a bath in a public house. The woman running it pauses when she sees you. You strip down, slide into the hot water and close your eyes. For a moment it feels almost human. Then the steam rises. And so does the stink. It comes off your skin like smoke from a bad fire. The tub darkens. You scrub and scrub. And keep scrubbing until your arms ache and your neck bleeds. You leave a ring in the tub that looks like something died in it. And maybe it did. The woman doesn't say a word, but she doesn't let you come back either. You burn your coat that night. The one you've worn since your first job. Makes your lungs sting. The smoke is greasy, dark, and smells like everything you've done. You watch the flames with glassy eyes and don't feel better when it's over. The next night, you try to wear something clean, but it doesn't matter, because the new coat will smell like the others soon enough. They always do. You realize something awful. There's no such thing as a clean resurrectionist, not in body, not in soul, and certainly not in scent. There are smells worse than death, like being halfway between it and the world that doesn't know what to do with you anymore. Chapter 7. When the wrong body shows up. Not all mistakes are made by amateurs. You've done this dozens of times now. Long nights, heavy sacks, fast exits. You've sold to 3 different colleges, worked for 7 different surgeons, and buried more evidence than you can count. You know how to spot fresh dirt. You know how to pry a lid without splitting the wood. You even know how to cut a jaw out of a corpse without breaking too many teeth. But all it takes is one night, one misread stone, one rush job, and suddenly you're standing in a back alley with a sack full of the wrong body. It starts like any other job. A contact at the college says they need an older male, preferably large, preferably whole. There's a new class of students starting tomorrow, and the professor wants to impress. You get the name, the site, the date of burial 3 days prior. Perfect timing. You do the work. Quietly, smoothly. You work alone this time because your usual partners are either in jail, drunk, or worse. But you don't mind. You're confident, experienced, efficient. You dig with a rhythm that feels like music. Scrape, lift, breathe, repeat. The grave opens like it's greeting an old friend. You expect to find a standard case, middle-aged, work-worn, maybe still in a decent set of boots. You lift the lid, take one look and freeze. It's a child, maybe 8, maybe younger. Eyes closed, hands folded, lips slightly parted like they were whispering to someone on the way out. You don't move, not for a full minute. You glance back at the grave marker. You recheck your notes. The dates don't match. Wrong grave, wrong body. You could rebury it, pretend you never saw it, walk away and come back another night, but then you hear footsteps, a soft shuffle near the far wall, maybe a guard, maybe someone walking their dog, maybe someone who's seen you now. You act on instinct, tie the sack, grab your tools, move, back to the cart, back to the alley behind the college. The student is waiting, doesn't say a word. You hand off the sack. He slides it into the rear door and disappears. You tell yourself it's over. You tell yourself you'll make it right. But the next night the college sends word. Don't come back. No explanation, no payment, just silence. You send a runner to ask questions. He comes back, pale. They open the bag in front of the whole class. You feel your stomach twist. They thought it was a joke at first, then they saw the shoes still laced and the stitches from where the undertaker had done a terrible job on the chest. Some kid fainted. One of the women screamed. The professor threatened to call the constable. You sit with that. You don't sleep that night. You imagine the child's face lying still under the lamp, not in a field, not in a quiet churchyard, but on a polished wooden table under the gaze of a dozen shocked, disgusted students. You remember the feel of the body in your arms. Too light, too cold, too wrong. You drink heavily. You burn the notes from that night, rip out the page with the burial location. You vow to double-check everything from now on, triple-check, but it doesn't matter. The damage is done. You try to take another job 2 nights later, a new surgeon, one who doesn't ask questions. You dig fast, pull fast, deliver fast. He opens the sack, doesn't flinch, but he turns to you and says, "No children." Then he pays you anyway. That's when you realize it's not about right or wrong. Not really. It's about reputation. You've been marked now, not blacklisted, not shunned, but known as someone who's careless, the worst kind of resurrectionist, not cruel, just clumsy. You still take jobs, but they're fewer, quieter. You're watched more closely. The students don't talk to you. The professors give shorter instructions. The man in the alley stops nodding when you pass. You think about quitting. You think about writing to someone, confessing. But who would listen? Who would care? Instead, you keep digging because it's all you know. Because your hands are too stained to be used for anything else. Because even now you still need to eat. But every time you tie up a sack, you pause. Every time you lift the lid, your stomach tightens because there's always the chance this might be the wrong one again. Chapter 8. Fog, Firelight, and the Ones Who Never Left. It's the kind of night that breathes down the back of your neck. The fog rolls in thick and low, soaking your coat and muffling your footsteps until you can't even hear your own boots. It curls around tombstones like fingers, clings to the mossy walls of the churchyard like regret. You light your lantern, but it barely punches through the mist, just a dull, nervous glow in the wet dark. You shouldn't be here tonight, you know that. Something feels wrong. But the job came in late and promised double your usual rate, a rush order. The professor didn't explain why, just that the body had to be fresh and delivered before sunrise. You said yes before you thought it through. And now you're here, alone. Shovel in hand, cold air seeping through your gloves, heart already trying to crawl up your throat. You check the stone, a small grave, new, not even a week old. The dirt hasn't settled yet. The marker is simple. A name, a date, a short verse that the family probably agonized over. You don't read it. You never do anymore. You start to dig. Every scrape of your shovel is a whisper. The fog muffles everything but your breathing. You go deeper. The earth is heavy with rain. It clings to the blade. Your arms ache quickly. Your palms already raw. You curse under your breath, but not too loud. And that's when you hear it. A sound that doesn't belong to you. Not an owl, not a fox. Not the wind shifting through old trees. A breath just behind you. You turn, lantern up. Nothing, just stones, grass, fog. You blink hard. Shake it off. Keep digging. You reach the coffin lid. It's newer than most. Strong wood, metal hinges, polished once upon a time. You wedge your fingers under the seam and lift. It creaks. Inside is the body. Male, older, thin face, grey beard, hands crossed neatly over a chest that no longer rises. Dressed in a black suit, boots still laced, skin pale but unspoiled. You've seen worse. You've carried worse. You hook the rope under his arms and brace yourself to pull, but then something shifts. Not the body, the ground. A groan rolls through the earth beneath you. Not like settling, like breathing. You freeze. Lantern shaking in your hand. You listen. Nothing. You pull anyway, because you have to. Because you've already gone too far. You lift him slowly, carefully, the ropes groaning in your gloves. He's heavier than he looks. You lay him out beside the grave, wrap him in the canvas and start refilling the hole. Your boots are slick with mud now, your coat soaked, your fingers shaking harder than you want to admit. You sling the body over your shoulder and start toward the wall. That's when you hear it again, not behind you, this time. Below. A thud, a knock, a slow deliberate scrape. Your lantern flickers, you don't look back. You run, you scale the wall, slip once, land hard. Shoulder the body again and sprint down the dirt lane toward the waiting cart that's not there yet. You curse into the dark. You lean the sack against a tree. You light a second lantern. You pace. You try not to look at the canvas. You try not to hear the sounds still echoing in your ears because you've done this too many times. And tonight it's different. The cart arrives late. A new driver, young, doesn't ask questions. You load the body and don't look back. You don't sleep that morning. You sit by your fire and stare into the flames like they might burn the memory out of your head. But it doesn't work because now you remember something your partner once told you. A joke at the time. Half drunk, half mad, but said with enough weight to stick. "They say some graves breathe," he muttered, wiping mud from his lip. "On foggy nights, when you take the wrong one." You laughed then. You don't laugh now. Because you think you know what he meant, and worse, you think it's not the only one. Chapter 9, Rain Rats and the Unmarked Grave. You wake up with wet socks, the ceiling's leaking again, rain's been coming down for 2 days straight, and now your room smells like mildew and rotting floorboards. You sit up slowly, your spine cracks like a pistol, your shirt clings to you with the kind of damp that's already seeped into your bones. You should say no to tonight's job. Everything in you screams it, but your pockets are empty and your last sack of bread moulded over. Again. The request is strange. No name, no location. Just a corner of the old pauper's lot near the river. No marker, no stone. Just the one next to the collapsed elm. It's been raining non-stop for 36 hours and someone wants a body pulled from what's essentially a swamp. You should say no. You don't. By the time you get there, it's pouring. The kind of rain that drowns rats and seeps into your boots the moment you take a step. You wrap your coat tight, tie your tools into an oilcloth and squelch your way through knee-high grass and loose mud. The pauper's field is a disaster. No paths, no lanterns, just waterlogged earth, drooping trees and the occasional broken wooden cross half sunken in the mire. You spot the elm. It's lying across the ground like a dead arm, roots curled upward like they're trying to claw back in. There's a shallow rise in the earth next to it. No stone, no sign, just a guess. You pick up your shovel and begin to dig, and immediately regret it. The mud swallows the blade like it's trying to help. Each scoop weighs 20 pounds. Your hands are slick, your shoulders burning after 10 minutes. There's no rhythm here. Just squish, suck, curse, repeat. You're soaked by the fifth swing, your legs disappearing up to the calf in cold, clinging muck. By the time you hit something solid, you're half mad from the rain hammering your skull and the rats darting just out of lantern range. Wood, barely. The coffin's thin, unfinished, and already falling apart. The lid caves under your touch. There's no lifting it, just peeling it back like soft bark. Inside is a mess. You're not sure what you expected. Maybe some recognition of human shape. But this, it's a tangle of bones, flesh, and something moving. The rats have gotten there first. At least two scramble away when your light hits them. Another one stays behind, chewing. You don't scream. You've seen worse. But this is close. You take a step back, not from fear, from caution. The earth is too soft, the edge of the grave collapsing inward like a hungry mouth. You nearly fall in. You wedge the hook under what's left of the shoulders, loop the rope and lift. The corpse doesn't cooperate. The skin tears. The bones crack. The torso slides sideways, taking part of the rib cage with it. You pause, breathing hard, rain soaking your face, water trickling down your collar like cold fingers. You consider giving up, but you don't. You get the remains into the sack, what's left anyway. You tie it, cinch it tight, and drag it back to the path. There's no cart this time, just you, a wheelbarrow you found in a ditch, and a mile of muddy streets between here and the medical school's cellar door. You trudge. You slip once, fall hard, land face first in the mud. The sack tumbles sideways, one bone poking through the canvas like it's trying to escape. You curse. Loud. You don't care anymore. When you reach the door, no one answers your knock. You bang again. Eventually, a thin-faced student opens it. He looks at the sack, then at you. "You're late," he says. You don't answer. He takes the bag without a word and disappears into the dark. You don't wait for payment. You turn, shoulder aching, face raw from wind and rain, and walk back through the night, past the lamplight, past the rats, past the memory of what you just did. You get home, you strip, you burn your shirt. You sit by the hearth and listen to the rain. You can still hear the rats. Chapter 10. The night you nearly didn't come back. You know what night it is before you even open your eyes. There's something in the air, a wrongness, the kind of thick silence that only shows up when the sky's still deciding whether it wants to snow or just swallow the moon. It's been weeks since you last pulled a body, not because the job's dried up, they never do, but because your body started to say no. Your back cracked when you so much as lifted your boots. Your fingers ached from frost-bitten nights, your left shoulder still twinged when the weather turned. But this job, this one you couldn't turn down. The offer came through a man you didn't know, passed on by someone you owed. All it said was, "Old grave, rural parish, big payout tonight." You told yourself no, you told yourself you were done. But at dusk there you were, loading a lantern and rope into your canvas bag, pulling on the same coat that now fit more like skin than fabric. You lit a half-spent cigarette, tightened the scarf around your neck, and headed out into the chill. The graveyard was farther out than usual. Not quite the countryside, but beyond the last line of gas lamps. You arrived on foot, breath showing in puffs that made you look like a tired ghost. The place was almost charming. Small church, iron fence, crooked rows of mossy stones. But the grave itself wasn't marked. Just a spot near the edge where the grass sunk a little deeper than everywhere else. Whoever wanted it dug up didn't want anyone else knowing it ever existed. You unpacked slowly, laid out your tools, lit the lantern, and hung it on a rusted hook by the gate. You started to dig. The ground was oddly soft for midwinter. Not muddy, just loose, crumbly. It gave too easily, like it wanted you to find something. You hit the coffin faster than expected. Old wood, weathered. No polish, no hinges, just boards nailed together like a crate. That's when things went wrong. You leaned in to lift the lid, and the ground behind you gave way. Suddenly you were falling. Not far, just enough to drop through the earth like a stone into a shallow pit. You landed on your back with a grunt, mud sliding in behind you. For a moment it was just pain and cold. Then you opened your eyes and realized where you were. You were inside the grave. No, not a grave, a pit. A pit with more than one occupant. You scrambled to sit up and found your hand pressed against a face. Cold, waxy, staring. You reeled back, fell again. Your lantern had landed sideways, still burning, casting flickering light across what surrounded you. Not one body, three, stacked, bent, folded, shoved in without care. This wasn't burial, this was disposal. You choked down the bile rising in your throat. Your hands found the shovel, and you began clawing at the side, trying to climb. But the walls just crumbled. Mud gave way, your boots slipped. You cursed, you looked up and saw someone. A shape, silhouetted by the lantern's light, standing just beyond the pit, watching. You froze. "Help!" you rasped. It didn't move. You blinked. The shape was gone. You clawed harder. Eventually you found a root, pulled yourself out, rolled onto the grass, coughing. The lantern was still there. Still lit, but the light didn't feel warm. You packed up without finishing, left the grave open. You didn't care. You walked for an hour before realizing your boots were full of grave water, and your hands were still bleeding. When you got home you didn't speak, you didn't sleep. You stared at your lantern, still muddy, still burning. somehow, and that was the night you nearly didn't come back, not because something tried to stop you, but because something almost kept you. Chapter 11. The Man with the Ledger. He found you the same way everyone else did, by not saying his name. It started with a knock, soft, almost polite. You didn't answer at first, just stared at the door. Most clients never came to your place. They left notes, passed word through back doors or alleyway whispers. But this man knocked and waited. When you finally opened it, he was standing there in a long grey coat, too clean for the street and too quiet for the weather. His face was long, pale, unreadable. He didn't carry a bag or a weapon or anything that said who or what he was, just a black leather ledger. "I have work," he said. You didn't ask his name, you didn't ask where he came from, you just stepped aside and he walked in. He opened the ledger like a priest opening scripture. Inside, lists, dates, locations, names, too many of them. Some you recognized, doctors, professors, even a rival resurrectionist who'd vanished last spring. "These are to be delivered, in order, quietly." He tapped the page. You looked closer. It wasn't just names. It was bodies, specific ones, graves no one should have known about. And they weren't all fresh. Some had been buried for decades. "Why these?" you asked. The man smiled, or tried to. "Because no one else will touch them." You knew better than to argue. You took the list. He left without another word. You didn't see him walk away. One moment he was at your door, the next he wasn't. The jobs were different. The first was a woman buried 30 years ago under an old chapel that had since burned down. No marker, no map, just a guess. You found her. Barely. The wood was blackened. The bones were brittle. When you pulled her skull from the rubble, a piece of her jaw disintegrated in your hand. Still, you delivered her. The man never appeared. But the payment arrived the next morning, folded into an envelope under your door. No note, just coins. The second job was worse. A drowned man, buried in the marsh. The pit filled faster than you could bail. You nearly went under with him. You woke up coughing mud with something clutched in your fist that definitely hadn't been yours. You burned your gloves after that. And yet, you kept going. The list wasn't finished, and you knew, somehow, it had to be finished. Every time you crossed off a name, another appeared. The ledger grew. Even though you never wrote in it, you stopped asking how. By the fifth body, you stopped feeling much at all. It was like the list knew you, your limits, your fears. It sent you to the flooded catacombs, to the grave behind the asylum, to the tomb inside the abandoned crypt, locked behind a rusted iron door that opened far too easily. And every time you returned, with another sack, another silence, another coin-filled envelope, you told yourself it was just a job, but deep down, you knew this wasn't anatomy work anymore. It wasn't for science. It wasn't even for money. You were collecting something for someone. And you had no idea what for, or when it would stop, but you couldn't walk away, because the man with the ledger, he knew where you'd be next. He always had. Chapter 12. The Final Grave. You knew it was the last one before you ever picked up the shovel. It wasn't written down, not exactly. The ledger didn't say final or last. But there was a space at the bottom of the page, a blank line where you expected another name, another grave, another set of miserable instructions. And there was none, just that silence, that quiet, terrible emptiness. The grave was located just outside the city, not in a churchyard, not in a pauper's lot, not anywhere you'd expect a body to be, just a narrow clearing in a forest no one walked through anymore. You didn't recognize the name on the page. No date, no epitaph, no context, just one line. Return what was taken. You arrived at dusk, lantern in hand. The forest was damp, old, too still. Even the wind seemed hesitant to move through the trees. You followed a path that barely existed, half covered in moss and leaves, until it opened into a low, flat glade. There was a single stone at the center. No words, no marks, just stone. The earth was soft, unsettlingly so, like something underneath was waiting to breathe again. You dug. Not carefully, not with skill. You dug like a man trying to outrun the work, every shovel full of prayer to get this over with. Your hands bled, your breath came short, the lantern shook beside you, and then wood, old, black, slick with rot. You opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a body, of course, but it was wrong. It wasn't rotting, it wasn't decayed, it was sleeping. Skin pale but not cold, hands folded, chest still. And beside the body, a sack, your sack. Canvas, stained, tied the same way you tied it every night you worked. You didn't put it there. You knew you didn't, but it was yours. You reached for it, hesitated, then pulled the ties loose. Inside were coins, every payment you'd ever received, every single one, and something else, a note, written in a hand you didn't recognize. You've taken enough, now return it. You blinked. The forest didn't move. You looked at the body again. The face looked familiar, too familiar. It was yours, or close enough, older maybe, or not yet. You dropped the sack, fell back, scrambled out of the hole like it was fire and poison combined. The forest didn't move. The grave was open, and you understood. You had one more job, and it wasn't to dig. It was to stop, to bury what should have stayed buried. You didn't run. You filled the hole slowly, one shovelful at a time, your own breath shaking in your chest. You didn't look down again. You didn't speak. When it was done, the glade was still again. The ledger in your coat burned against your ribs. When you looked later, the page was blank. All of them were. You never saw the man again. But some nights, when the wind is still and the ground feels too soft, you swear you hear your own name whispered in the soil. And you wonder how deep you'd have to dig to find yourself again, or whether you already did. So you made it. Sort of. You clawed your way through midnight mud, stared down your own reflection in a coffin, and smelled like death longer than anyone should. But if this story taught you anything, it's that grave robbing in the 1800s wasn't a thrilling night job. It was a descent into rot, into madness, and sometimes into yourself. You wouldn't have lasted a day, but hey, at least now you don't have to try. Until next time, keep your shovel clean and your name off any ledgers.